The commanding officer was ambushed at 900 hours by 5 cubs armed with a cardboard box. Let me back up because I know how that sounds. You need context for this disaster. Colleagues, you need to understand what led to the moment when Commander Zhao met, decorated veteran of 3 campaigns, got tackled by juvenile Karethi who had somehow weaponized shipping materials. It started 6 weeks before the incident. The cubs arrived on station as part of a diplomatic exchange program, which is fancy terminology for political hostages, wearing smaller uniforms. 5 of them, ages ranging from what I estimate was 4 to 6 standard cycles. Karethi young, if you have never had the pleasure, are not like our offspring. They are not born small and helpless. They emerge from the spawning pools, already capable of ripping through steel, plating with their claws, already possessing a full set of fangs that can puncture body armor. The Karethi government assured us that cubs were docile. They used that exact word. Docile. The cubs destroyed their first containment area within 20 minutes of arrival. I am head of station security, which means this catastrophe fell directly into my lap. My second officer, Koth, brought me the damage report with shaking hands. 3 walls gouged to ribbons, furniture reduced to component molecules, and 1 observation window that had been reinforced to withstand micrometeorite impacts now sporting a crack pattern that looked disturbingly like a Karethi territorial marker. The cubs sat in the wreckage, grooming each other, completely calm. We moved them to reinforced quarters. They destroyed those in an hour. We tried the cargo bay with force field. They found a resonance frequency and shattered the generators. Dr. Hixina, our xenopediatric specialist, sedated them. They metabolized the drug so fast, she worried about liver damage and gave up. By week 2, I had a rotation of 6 security officers whose sole job was to watch 5 cubs and prevent them from dismantling the station piece by piece. The cubs were not malicious. They were not even particularly aggressive. They were simply bored out of their minds. And a bored Karethi cub has the destructive capacity of a small tactical weapon. I filed reports. I contacted the Karethi liaison, who found my distress hilarious. I requisitioned additional containment equipment. Command denied the request due to budget concerns, which I will remember during my next performance review. At week 3, the cubs figured out how to open pressurized doors. At week 4, they started coordinating their escapes. By week 5, I slept in my office because I needed to respond to containment breaches at all hours. The cubs never hurt anyone. They just wanted to explore, to run, to engage with anything novel in their environment. Unfortunately, their idea of engagement involved claws and teeth and an apparent immunity to the concept of structural integrity. Station morale plummeted. Nobody wanted assignments near the cubs area. My security team started calling in sick. Dr. Hixina pulled me aside after one particularly spectacular escape where the cubs had somehow reached the botanical gardens and shredded an entire month's worth of crop research. "We cannot keep doing this," she said. Her scales faded from stress. "I have studied Karethi development. I have 3 degrees in xenopediatric care. Nothing in my training prepared me for this. They are not responding to any standard. Behavioral protocols. What do you suggest? I asked because I was desperate enough to try anything, short of jettisoning them into space, which was both immoral and would create a diplomatic incident. I have no idea, she admitted. We need someone who specializes in managing aggressive juveniles from predator species. I laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. The thing is, the galaxy does not produce many specialists in that particular field. Most predator species keep their young on home worlds away from delicate space stations filled with beings who can be accidentally maimed. The Korethi were unique in their willingness to use cubs as diplomatic tools and equally unique in their complete lack of concern about what happened to station infrastructure. That is when Command sent me the file on Kira. Human. Of course it was a human. The species shows up everywhere now, taking jobs nobody else wants, solving problems through methods that make absolutely no sense. The file listed her profession as dog trainer, which I had to look up because I had never heard of dogs. Apparently they are Earth predators that humans domesticated thousands of cycles ago. The images showed creatures with fur and fangs and claws, quadrupedal pack hunters that humans keep in their homes for companionship. The fact that humans consider apex predators to be suitable household pets should have told me everything I needed to know about their species psychology. Kira's qualifications included behavioral management for aggressive canines, pack dynamics expertise, and a certification in something called enrichment therapy. Her record showed she had rehabilitated animals deemed dangerous and unmanageable. She had worked with creatures called wolves, which apparently are what dogs used to be before humans decided to make friends with them. The fee for her consultation was expensive but less than the cost of repairing another section of the station. I approved the contract. She arrived on a transport during Gamma shift, which meant I was running on 2 hours of sleep when I met her at the docking bay. I expected someone imposing, perhaps scarred from her work with dangerous animals. Instead, I got a woman barely tall enough to reach my shoulder, wearing soft civilian clothes and carrying a bag that appeared to contain nothing but treats and toys. Commander Vrelthaxi, she asked, pronouncing my name correctly on the first try, which almost never happens with humans. That is correct. You are the behavioral specialist. Dog trainer, she corrected, smiling. That way humans do when they show teeth, but mean friendliness instead of threat. But sure, we can go with specialist. Where are the cubs? I led her through the station, explaining the situation as we walked. The destroyed quarters, the failed containment attempts, the complete ineffectiveness of standard protocols. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a handheld device. We reached the cub's current containment area, which was the 5th location we had tried. Force fields created a large enclosure, reinforced after their previous break through. Inside, the 5 cubs prowled restlessly. The smallest one, barely half the size of its siblings, kept ramming its head against the field boundary. The largest one was methodically testing different sections with its claws. How long have they been in there? Kira asked. This location, 4 days. We rotate them to outdoor exercise yards twice per shift. And what do they do in the exercise? Yards. Run, fight each other, destroy any equipment we leave out. She nodded slowly, watching the cubs, with an expression I could not read. What do they do the rest of the time? Sleep, pace, attempt to escape. Right. She set down her bag. Okay, I see the problem. I waited. She continued, watching the cubs, who had noticed her presence and were now focused on this new element in their environment. The largest one approached the force field, head lowered, studying her with predator intelligence. The problem, I prompted, is that they are unmanageable. No, Kira said. The problem is that they are bored out of their minds and nobody has given them anything to do. I stared at her. We give them exercise time. Exercise is not the same as enrichment. Look at them. They are intelligent, social, curious predators stuck in an empty box with nothing to engage their minds. Of course they are destroying things. What else are they supposed to do? Not destroy the station would be an excellent start. She laughed, which seemed inappropriate, given the severity of the situation. Commander, have you ever tried to keep a working dog in an apartment with no toys, no training, no mental stimulation? I have never kept a dog anywhere. Well, they go crazy, they chew furniture, they dig holes, they bark constantly. Not because they are bad dogs, but because they need jobs, they need purpose. These cubs are the same, except with bigger teeth. I felt my patience, already worn thin by weeks of crisis management, beginning to fray. What exactly are you proposing? Enrichment, environmental complexity, problem-solving activities, play. Play, she confirmed, structured interaction that channels their energy and intelligence into non-destructive outlets. The concept did not translate well. Kareth adults do not play. Most species I knew did not engage in play beyond early development. The idea of deliberately encouraging the cubs to be more active seemed counterproductive. You want to give them more ways to cause chaos, I said. I want to give them appropriate outlets so they stop causing chaos everywhere else. She turned to face me fully. Commander, you hired me because nothing else was working. Let me try my methods. If I make things worse, you can fire me and bill Earth for the damages. It was the kind of reckless confidence that probably should have worried me more. Instead, I was too exhausted to argue. What do you need to start? She smiled again. A cardboard box. I had to look up cardboard too. Pressed plant fibers used on Earth for packaging and storage. Cheap, disposable, ubiquitous in human commerce. We had some in the cargo bay, used for shipments from Earth colonies. You want to give them trash, I said. I want to give them something novel to investigate, something they can interact with safely, something that engages their curiosity. Kaoth, who had been standing nearby during this entire conversation, made a choking sound that might have been suppressed laughter. I glared at him. He straightened and pretended to study his data pad. Fine, I said. One box, but when this fails, we try my suggestion of formal behavioral conditioning. Deal. We retrieved a box from cargo. It was large, perhaps a meter on each side. Originally used to ship hydroponic supplies. Kira inspected it carefully, nodding approval at its structural integrity. She carried it to the cub's enclosure, while I deactivated a section of the force field. The cubs immediately focused on us, on the box, on this new element in their environment. The smallest one made a chittering sound. The largest one's ears went flat. Kira stepped inside the enclosure. Wait, I started, reaching for the emergency containment protocol. She set the box down in the center of the space and stepped back out. I reactivated the force field. The cubs did not attack her during those few seconds of vulnerability, which surprised me. They were too focused on the box. Now what? I asked. Now we watch. For a long moment, nothing happened. The cubs stared at the box. The box sat. They're doing nothing because it was a box. I was about to point out the futility of this entire exercise when the smallest cub approached, cautious, one paw forward at a time. It sniffed the box, touched it with one claw. The box made a slight crinkling sound. The cub jumped backward, startled. Its siblings chittered. The smallest one approached again, braver now, and batted at the box with more force. The box shifted slightly. Within 30 seconds, all 5 cubs surrounded the box. They pawed at it, pushed it, bit at the corners. One of them climbed on top. Another tried to get inside. The largest one grabbed it in its jaws and shook it, and the box made that distinctive cardboard rattle. The cubs went absolutely still. Then they exploded into activity, all 5 attacking the box with focused intensity, but not destructive intensity. Play intensity. They were not trying to destroy it. They were investigating, testing, engaging. The smallest one crawled inside and disappeared, then popped back out to surprise its siblings. The largest one used the box as cover to stalk the others. 2 of them fought over who got to stand on top. Hugkayoth said. Kira smiled, watching the cubs with evident satisfaction. Predators love boxes, ambush points, hiding spots, novel textures. It engages their instincts in a positive way. The cubs played with that box for 3 hours straight. When they finally tired, they curled up around it and slept. The smallest one slept inside it. For the first time in 6 weeks, the station was quiet. I stood there, watching them. These apex predators, rendered docile by pressed plant fibers, and wondered what other impossible things this human might accomplish with trash. The cubs did not destroy anything for 3 days. 3 days. Do you understand what that means? Colleagues, for nearly a month and a half I had been responding to containment breaches. Every few hours, my security team operated in a constant state of crisis. Station maintenance filed formal complaints about structural damage. And then a human showed up with a box. And suddenly the most dangerous juveniles in this sector became manageable. I should have been relieved. Instead, I was suspicious. Dr. Hicks Anna shared my concern. She arrived at my office on the morning of day 4, scales rippling with agitation. We need to discuss the cubs. They have been calm, I said. Exactly, it is not natural. I have been monitoring their vital signs. Neural activity remains high, but physical aggression has dropped to nearly 0. That box must be producing some kind of effect we are not detecting. Kira said it was ordinary cardboard. Then why are they obsessed with it? It was a fair question. The cubs treated that box like a sacred object. They slept around it, played with it constantly, became agitated if anyone approached the force field near it. The smallest cub who we had started calling tiny despite regulations against naming diplomatic assets refused to leave the box for more than a few minutes at a time. Run a full analysis, I ordered. Chemical composition, radiation, signature, everything. If that human brought something dangerous onto this station, I want to know. Hixana nodded and left. I returned to reviewing security reports, which were blessedly boring for the first time in weeks. No breaches, no damages, no incidents. Just routine patrol logs and maintenance schedules. Kaoth entered during beta shift with Hixana's results. You are not going to believe this, Commander. Try me. At this point nothing would surprise me. The box is completely ordinary. Standard cardboard, trace chemicals, consistent with manufacturing process. No anomalous properties whatsoever. Just pressed plant fibers exactly as advertised. I read the report myself. Comprehensive analysis, multiple scanning methods, all confirming the same impossible conclusion. An ordinary box was somehow managing 5 apex predator cubs better than our entire security infrastructure. This makes no sense, I said. Kira is in the observation area if you want to ask her. I found the human sitting cross-legged on the floor outside the cubs' enclosure, making notes on her data pad. The cubs were engaged in some kind of game involving the box and what appeared to be rules they had invented themselves. One cub would hide behind the box while the others stalked it from different angles. Explain this, I said, holding up the analysis report. Kira glanced at it and shrugged. What is there to explain? It is a box. A box that has completely altered their behavior because it gives them something to do. Structure, purpose. Look. She pointed at the cubs. That is a hunting game. They are practicing ambush techniques, using the box as cover. It engages their predator instincts in a controlled way. They are playing. I said, the concept still feeling strange in my mouth. They are learning through play. There is a difference. Watch Tiny. She indicated the smallest cub who was attempting to fit inside the now somewhat battered box. She is problem-solving. The box is getting smaller as they destroy it bit by bit, so she has to figure out new ways to fit inside. That is spatial reasoning development. I watched Tiny wiggle into the box, which was indeed noticeably smaller than when we first introduced it. The cub had to fold herself in a specific way to fit, adjusting position several times before succeeding. When she finally got comfortable, she made a chittering sound that her siblings seemed to recognize as a signal to leave her alone. This cannot be this simple. I said, why not? Because we tried everything. Behavioral conditioning, environmental modifications, chemical interventions. We consulted experts. We reviewed every piece of literature on Karethi development. A box should not be the solution. Kira stood, brushing off her clothes. Commander, sometimes the solution is simple. These are intelligent social predators who were stuck in an empty environment with nothing to engage their natural instincts. You gave them a box which provides hiding spots, ambush opportunities, novel textures, and problem-solving challenges. It hits every major enrichment category. Enrichment. I repeated. The word still did not translate well into my language. The closest equivalent meant something like unnecessary luxury, which seemed wrong. Mental and physical stimulation through environmental complexity. She clarified, it is not a luxury. It is a biological need, especially for intelligent species. You would not keep a sentient being in sensory deprivation and expect them to become right. Of course not. Then why would you keep intelligent cubs in an empty room and expect different results? The logic was sound, which made it more frustrating. I had 3 degrees in security management and 2 commendations for crisis response. And this human was making me feel like I had missed something obvious. We gave them exercise time. I said defensive. Exercise is not enrichment. Exercise just burns energy. Enrichment engages the mind. She turned back to watch the cubs. Look, I know this seems weird to you. Most species do not think about animal psychology this way. But humans have been studying this for centuries. We learned it because we had to. Because we kept predators as companions and needed them to be happy. Dogs, I said. Dogs, cats, ferrets, all sorts of predators. We figured out that bored predators are destructive predators. Not because they are bad, but because they need jobs. These cubs are the same, just bigger and with better claws. As if to demonstrate her point, the largest cub grabbed the box and shook it violently. Tiny tumbled out, chittering in what I was learning to recognize as annoyance rather than distress. The largest cub dropped the box and immediately assumed a play stance, inviting retaliation. Tiny pounced. They wrestled for a moment, careful despite their size and strength, then separated and went back to the box, as if nothing had happened. That is social bonding through play, Kira explained. They are learning boundaries, communication, pack dynamics, all things they need to develop into functional adults. Through a box, through structured interaction with an enriching element in their environment. The box is just the tool. Koth appeared in the corridor looking agitated. Commander, we have a situation. Command wants a briefing on the cubs. Status. They are questioning the consultation fees. Of course they were. I filed reports stating we had brought in a specialist who solved our crisis with packaging materials. It probably sounded absurd. It felt absurd. But the results were undeniable. Schedule the briefing, I said, and request that Kira attend. The briefing took place in my office. Command participating via secure channel. I summarized the situation, emphasized the dramatic improvement in cub behavior, and presented Hexana's analysis, confirming the box contained no dangerous materials. The response was predictable. You spent that much on a consultant who gave them a box. The voice belonged to Administrator Thexnol, whose primary concern was always budgetary. The cubs have not caused any containment breaches or property damage in 6 days. I countered. That represents a significant cost. Savings in repairs and security over time. Because of a box. Because of applied behavioral science. Kira interjected. She had been quiet until now, letting me present the facts. The box is not magic. It is a tool that provides enrichment. which addresses the root cause of the cubs' destructive behavior. They were not bad cubs. They were understimulated cubs. This does not align with our xenopediatric protocols, Hexana added, though she sounded less certain than before. I have been reviewing human literature on animal enrichment. The concepts are sound, but we have never applied them to sentient juveniles. Why not? Kira asked. Sentient juveniles still have biological needs. Intelligence does not eliminate boredom. There was a long pause. I could imagine Thexnel trying to formulate an argument that would not sound ridiculous. The problem was that results spoke louder than theory, and the results were 5 calm cubs who had stopped dismantling the station. Continue current protocols, Thexnel finally said, but document everything. If this works long-term, we may need to revise our procedures for managing juvenile predator species. The channel closed. Koth exhaled slowly. Hexana looked thoughtful rather than skeptical now. Kira smiled that human smile. So, about those additional enrichment materials I mentioned. What do you need? I asked, resigned. More boxes would be a good start. The box lasted 2 weeks before the cubs finally destroyed it completely. I arrived at the observation area to find Kira standing amidst scattered cardboard fragments, looking pleased rather than concerned. Inside the enclosure, the cubs were playing with the pieces, tossing shreds of cardboard at each other like some kind of bizarre game. They killed it, I said. They loved it to death, Kira corrected. This is actually perfect. It means they engaged with it fully, explored every possibility, and naturally moved to the next phase, which is more complex enrichment. They have mastered the box. Now we give them new challenges. She had already prepared a list. Boxes of different sizes, tubes they could crawl through, platforms at varying heights, objects with different textures and sounds. Each item seemed deliberately chosen to engage specific behaviors. This is going to cost more than the original consultation, I said. Commander, how much did you spend on repairs in the month before I arrived? She had a point. I approved the requisition. Over the next 10 days, we introduced new elements gradually. The cubs adapted to each one with enthusiasm that bordered on obsession. They figured out puzzle feeders in under an hour. They turned a simple rope into an elaborate tug-of-war game with complex rules. They built what I can only describe as a fort using boxes and platforms, complete with guard rotations. Dr. Hexana spent more time in the observation area, documenting everything. This is revolutionary, she told me on day 8. We are watching real-time cognitive development through play. I need to publish this after the diplomatic exchange concludes. I reminded her. The Karethi government might not appreciate us treating their cubs like laboratory subjects. We are not. We are providing appropriate developmental care, care that apparently nobody else thought to provide. Koth approached during this conversation, data pad in hand. Commander, we have another situation. Commanding Officer Jalmet wants to inspect the cubs area personally. My scales went rigid. Why? He received a complaint that we are wasting resources on animal toys. He wants to assess whether the cubs actually need all this equipment? Of course, someone had noticed the steady stream of enrichment materials and filed a report. Probably someone from logistics who resented the additional inventory. Management. Jalmet arrived during Gamma shift with an expression that suggested he had already decided this entire operation was frivolous. He was a decorated officer, veteran of actual combat, the kind of commander who respected strength and discipline above all else. The Cubs area with its colorful boxes and platforms and toys probably looked like a recreational facility rather than a containment zone. This is what we are spending budget on, he asked, surveying the enclosure. This is what has prevented any containment breaches or property damage. For 3 weeks, I replied. They are Cubs. They should be controlled through discipline, not indulge with toys. Kira, who had been organizing new enrichment items nearby, stood up. Discipline does not address biological needs. These Cubs are intelligent predators who require mental stimulation. Take away the enrichment and they will go back to destroying the station. Jalmet turned to her with the kind of look that usually made junior officers reconsider their career choices. You are the human consultant. Dog trainer, she said, meeting his gaze. Without flinching. I work with predators for a living. These are not dogs, these are Karethi, one of the most dangerous species in this sector, which is why they need appropriate enrichment. A bored predator is a dangerous predator. A disciplined predator is a controlled predator. I could see this argument escalating into territory that would not end well for station morale. Commander Jalmet, perhaps we could schedule a more detailed briefing. Kira can present the behavioral science behind these methods. I do not need a briefing. I need to see results. He turned back to the enclosure, where the Cubs had noticed his presence and were watching with predator focus. They appear calm enough. Remove the toys for 1 shift cycle. If they remain calm, we will know that equipment is unnecessary. That is a terrible idea, Kira said flatly. The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop several degrees. Nobody spoke to Jalmet that way. Even I phrased disagreements as respectful suggestions. Excuse me, he said. Taking away enrichment after they have adjusted to it is not a test. It is set up for failure. You will stress them out, trigger destructive behaviors, and undo weeks of progress. Then you will blame the Cubs for being unmanageable, when really you just removed the thing that was managing them. I have managed personnel in combat situations. I think I can assess whether Cubs need toys. These are not personnel. They are developing juveniles with specific biological needs. Different skill set. Jalmet's expression went cold. You are suggesting I do not understand management. I am suggesting you do not understand enrichment therapy for intelligent predators, which is fine. It is not your job. It is mine. I stepped between them before this could escalate further. Commander, perhaps a demonstration would be more useful than removing equipment. Kira could show you how the Cubs interact with the enrichment, explain the behavioral benefits. I do not need a demonstration. But he sounded slightly less hostile. Which was progress. I need evidence this is worth the expense. Kira crossed her arms. The evidence is 3 weeks of zero incidents. But if you want a demonstration, I can show you something interesting. The cubs have been working on a new skill. What skill? Coordinated hunting behaviors. They have been using the platforms and boxes to practice ambush techniques. It is actually pretty impressive. This got his attention. Jalmet was military through and through. The concept of the cubs developing tactical skills appealed to his world view in a way that toys and play did not. Show me, he said. Kira smiled, and I felt a sudden premonition that I should probably intervene. But Jalmet had already committed, and backing out now would look weak. She retrieved something from her bag. A cardboard box, naturally. But this one was different. Smaller, reinforced with tape, with a handle cut into the top. This is a new enrichment item I have been introducing gradually. The cubs love it because it is portable. They can carry it around. Use it in different locations. Fascinating, Jalmet said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. The interesting part is how they have figured out to use it cooperatively. Watch. She opened a small access panel, the kind we used for introducing items, without deactivating the full force field, and slid the box through. Tiny immediately grabbed it and dragged it toward the other cubs. They clustered around it, chittering. That way they did when planning something, then coordinated and deliberate. They moved toward the far corner of the enclosure. They are hiding, Jalmet observed. They are setting up an ambush point. Kira corrected. That corner has the best sight lines too. The entrance and the weakest force field. Resonance. If they were going to plan an escape, that is where they would stage from. You taught them to plan escapes. I taught them to problem solve. They applied it to tactics on their own. Intelligence works that way. The cubs settled into position. Box placed strategically for cover. They looked like they were waiting for something. Tiny poked her head out of the box, watching the corridor with intense focus. Cute, Jalmet said dismissively, but hardly evidence of advanced cognition. Oh, this is not the demonstration, Kira said. This is. She pulled out her data pad and entered a command. The access panel opened again, and she slid another box into the corridor outside the enclosure, right in the path Jalmet would take to leave the observation area. The cubs went absolutely still. 5 sets of eyes locked onto the box in the corridor, then shifted to track Jalmet's position. What are they doing? He asked. Hunting, Kira said simply. They have learned that boxes mean interesting things happen. They are waiting to see what happens. With this one, nothing is going to happen with it. It is just a box. To you, sure. To them, it represents possibility, novelty, potential. Jalmet shook his head and turned to leave. This has been educational, but I have actual duties to attend to. He walked past the box. The cubs exploded into motion. What happened next occurred in roughly 3 seconds, but I will remember it for the rest of my life. The force field was solid. The cubs could not pass through it, but they had learned something during their weeks with Kira, something about timing and coordination, and reading body language. They had learned to hunt cooperatively. As Jalmet passed the box in the corridor, all 5 cubs launched themselves at the force field boundary closest to him. Not to break through. To create a distraction. The smallest one Tiny had positioned herself at the exact angle where the box in the corridor aligned with the access panel, the same panel Kira had just used, which was on automatic close delay for safety reasons. Standard 3-second delay. Tiny squeezed through that access panel. Like liquid, grabbed the box with her teeth and slammed into Jalmet's legs with the full momentum of a juvenile Karethi predator hidden inside cardboard packaging. The commanding officer of this station went down hard. The box exploded on impact, showering both of them with cardboard fragments. Tiny immediately leaped onto his chest, chittering with what I can only describe as absolute glee, while her siblings pressed against the force field, making sounds that resembled laughter. Security alarms activated automatically. Koth reached for his weapon. I froze, calculating how many regulations we had just violated and whether I would be court-martialed or simply demoted. Kira calmly pressed a button on her data pad. Tiny release. The cub immediately jumped off Jalmet and trotted back to the access panel, where she sat and looked at Kira expectantly. Good girl, Kira said and tossed a treat through the panel. Tiny caught it and returned to the enclosure. The panel closed. The other cubs mobbed her, clearly celebrating a successful hunt. Jalmet lay on the floor, covered in cardboard debris, staring at the ceiling. His uniform was torn, his dignity was shredded, but he was completely unharmed. Sir, I started, having no idea how to finish that sentence. He sat up slowly, looked at the cubs, who were now ignoring him entirely in favor of grooming Tiny and playing with the destroyed box pieces. Looked at Kira, who had an expression of studied innocence. You planned that, he said. I set up the conditions. Kira admitted. The cubs executed it. They have been practicing ambush coordination for 2 weeks. I wanted to show you what they were capable of when properly enriched and challenged, by having them attack me, by having them demonstrate play aggression in a controlled scenario. They never hurt you. Tiny could have used her claws. She chose not to because she understands. This is a game. That is learned behavior, Commander. That is what enrichment accomplishes. Jalmet stood, brushing cardboard off his uniform. I prepared to implement damage control protocols for whatever his response would be. He had every right to be furious. He could file formal complaints, demand Kira's removal, possibly even shut down the entire Cubs program. Instead, he started laughing. It was not a pleasant sound at first. It was the kind of laughter that comes when you realize you have been thoroughly outmaneuvered and can either accept it or look foolish trying to fight it. But gradually, it shifted into something more genuine. A cardboard box, he said. I got taken down by a cub with a cardboard box. Technically, she was inside the box. Kira clarified. Ambush hunting behavior. Very sophisticated for her age. How long have you been planning this demonstration? Since you said you wanted to remove the enrichment. I figured showing you was more effective than telling you. He looked at her for a long moment. Then at me. This human is either brilliant or completely insane. In my experience, those categories overlap significantly with humans. I said, Jalmet brushed off more cardboard and straightened his uniform as much as possible given the tears. Dr. Hixana, I assume you have been documenting all this. The doctor, who had been recording everything from the observation terminal, nodded quickly. Comprehensive behavioral data across 3 weeks, sir. The cub's development has been remarkable. I want a full report on my desk by tomorrow. Include cost analysis comparing enrichment expenses to previous damage, repair costs. He turned to Kira. You, human, this enrichment program continues. Expanded if necessary, but no more demonstrations involving command staff unless you clear them with me first, even if they would be really educational, Kira asked, especially then, but he was almost smiling. Commander Vrel Taxi, good work managing this situation. Unorthodox methods but effective results. He left walking with slightly less dignity than when he arrived, but significantly more understanding of predator psychology. Koth exhaled slowly. I thought we were all getting demoted. We still might be once he has time to think about what just happened. I said, but at least the Cubs program is secure. Kira was already back at the enclosure, watching Tiny receive enthusiastic grooming from her siblings. Koth, that was a perfect execution. The timing, the coordination, the controlled aggression. These cubs are going to develop into formidable adults. Because you gave them boxes, I said, still trying to process everything. Because we gave them appropriate environmental complexity that allowed their natural intelligence to develop properly. The boxes are just tools. Dr. Hixana joined us at the observation window. I have to completely rewrite our xenopediatric protocols. Everything we thought we knew about managing juvenile predators was wrong, or at least incomplete. Not wrong, Kira said. Just missing the enrichment component. You were focused on safety and containment, which makes sense. But intelligent beings need more than safe containers. They need stimulation, challenge, purpose, play. I said the word finally, feeling natural. Play, she confirmed. The cubs had settled down now, arranged around the scraps of their destroyed box, like it was precious treasure. Tiny was inside the largest piece, barely fitting, but clearly content. Over the following weeks, the changes expanded beyond just the cubs. Kira started training our staff on enrichment principles. Dr. Hixana incorporated the concepts into station medical protocols. Even maintenance got involved, designing more sophisticated enrichment structures. The cubs thrived. Their cognitive development accelerated. They learned commands, boundaries, social protocols. They never stopped being predators, but they became managed predators, channeling their instincts into appropriate outlets. When the diplomatic exchange period ended and the Korethi delegation arrived to retrieve the cubs, they were shocked at the transformation. The cubs were calm, responsive, physically healthy, and mentally sharp. The delegation had asked for detailed reports on our methods. Dr. Hixana provided comprehensive documentation. Kira offered to consult with Korethi facilities. I wrote a formal recommendation that enrichment protocols be adopted across all stations hosting juvenile predators. The day before the cubs left, Kira spent extra time in the observation area, just watching them play. I found her there during Gamma shift, making notes on her data pad. You are going to miss them, I said. A little, she admitted. But they are going home. That is good for them. You revolutionized our entire approach to xenopediatric care with cardboard boxes, she laughed. I provided enrichment using available materials. You all did the hard work of accepting that your previous methods needed adjustment. That is generous. We were completely wrong. You were incomplete. There is a difference. She stood stretching. Besides, this is what I do. Humans have been figuring out how to live with predators for thousands of years. We learned that you do not control them through dominance. You work with their nature, give them outlets, build relationships based on trust. Your species domesticated apex predators and kept them as pets because we recognize that predators are not problems to be solved. They are intelligent beings with needs that can be met through understanding and appropriate care. The cubs noticed us talking and approached the force field. Tiny pressed against it, chittering softly. Kira held up her hand to the barrier. The cub mimicked the gesture from her side, as close to touch as the field allowed. Goodbye, Tiny, Kira said softly. Be a good girl. 2 months after the cubs left, I received a transmission from the Karethi government. They had implemented enrichment protocols at their juvenile facilities. Behavioral incidents had dropped by 70%. They wanted to hire Kira as a permanent consultant. She declined, said she had other contracts, other species to help, but she provided training materials and recommended other human specialists who understood enrichment theory. I still see her occasionally. She consults on various stations, usually brought in when someone has a problem nobody else can solve. She always shows up with that same bag of treats and toys, that same confident smile. Last week I walked past our cargo bay and noticed someone had requisitioned 17 new cardboard boxes. When I investigated, I found Kira sitting on the floor, testing each one for structural integrity and what she called crinkle sound quality. What are you doing? I asked. New contract. Station Gamma has a pack of Rixian juveniles tearing up their botanical gardens. Apparently, nobody thought to give them enrichment. Let me guess. You are starting with boxes. Always start with boxes, she said. Seriously, holding one up to her ear and squeezing it to assess the sound. You would be amazed what you can accomplish with the right cardboard. I left her to her work, this human who had taught us that sometimes the most sophisticated solution is the simplest one. That intelligence is not about complex protocols and rigid control. It is about understanding needs and providing appropriate outlets. These days, every station in the sector keeps a supply of cardboard boxes in cargo, just in case, because you never know when you might need to ambush a commanding officer.